Namaste and a very warm welcome to today's explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you with me today because, well, we're going on a bit of a journey back in time. We're going to dive into an archaeological mystery that has honestly captivated the entire world for nearly a century. We are talking about the boy king himself, Tutankhamun. He was a teenager when he died, the very last heir of an incredibly powerful family that had ruled Egypt and its massive empire for centuries. He was laid to rest, laden with all this incredible gold, and then, eventually, just forgotten by time. But as you'll see, his story definitely didn't end there. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating saga of his discovery, the rather brutal extraction of his remains, and the modern medical marvels that are finally starting to give us some real answers.
So, to truly understand this story, we have to transport ourselves to that famous ancient Egyptian cemetery, the Valley of the Kings. Picture this, okay? It's January 5th, 2005. It's exactly 6 p.m. An angry wind is stirring up these ghostly dust devils as King Tut is being taken from his resting place. All day, these dark-bellied clouds had scudded across the desert sky, and now they were veiling the stars in this dramatic, casket gray. It was such an eerie, suspenseful evening. Really, it set the absolute perfect stage for the world's most famous mummy to glide, headfirst, right into a modern medical scanner.
Now, on that very same afternoon, the usual line of tourists from all over the world had descended into his cramped, rock-cut tomb. It's about 26 feet underground. They stood there, gazing at the beautiful murals on the walls of the burial chamber and peering at Tut's gilded face on his outer coffin lid. Some were literally whispering from their guidebooks, while others just stood there silently. And you really have to wonder, were they pondering Tut's untimely death in his late teens? Or maybe, just maybe, they were wondering with a little shiver if the infamous Pharaoh's curse, you know, the idea that death or misfortune would fall upon anyone who disturbed the king, was actually true. When the mummy was finally brought out that evening in 2005, Zahi Hawass, who was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities at the time, leaned over the body for a really long first look. And his immediate conclusion, he said, the mummy is in very bad condition because of what Carter did in the 1920s. He was, of course, talking about Howard Carter, the British archaeologist who finally discovered Tut's tomb in 1922 after years and years of totally futile searching. And Carter's 1922 discovery? It was nothing short of miraculous. Even though the tomb had clearly been hastily ransacked in antiquity, the contents were surprisingly complete. To this day, it remains the richest royal collection ever found. Carter spent months just carefully recording all the pharaoh's funerary treasures. These stunning artifacts in gold with their eternal brilliance, well, they were meant to guarantee his resurrection. They caused an absolute sensation back then, and honestly, they still get the most attention today. But Carter ran into a massive problem when he finally reached the mummy itself. The ritual resins they used had hardened over time, basically cementing Tut to the bottom of his solid gold coffin. So how did Carter deal with this? Well, it was quite brutal, actually. First, he tried setting the mummy outside in the blazing Egyptian sunshine, literally baking it at 149 degrees Fahrenheit, hoping that would melt the resins. But when that failed, he reported, with this very scientific detachment, that the material just had to be chiseled away. To extract the king, Carter's men literally had to remove the mummy's head and sever nearly every major joint. Now, in his defense, if he hadn't cut the mummy free, thieves most certainly would have circumvented the guards and just ripped it apart to steal all that gold. This early, super rough handling really sets the stage for modern archaeology, which thankfully focuses a lot less on the treasure and much more on the fascinating details of life and these really intriguing mysteries of death. Fast forward to 1968, more than 40 years after Carter's initial discovery, an anatomy professor x-rayed the mummy, and he revealed a startling fact. Beneath the resin that cakes his chest, Tut's breastbone and his front ribs are completely missing. Talk about an ancient cold case, right? And that brings us right back to that stormy night in 2005. Today, diagnostic imaging can be done with something called computed tomography, or a CT scan. Unlike a flat, traditional X-ray, a CT scan takes hundreds of X-rays in cross-section and puts them all together, kind of like slices of bread, to create a fully three-dimensional virtual body. The researchers had two massive questions they were hoping this new technology would answer for them. Exactly how did he die? And how old was he at the time of his death? Now, Tut wasn't the only one getting this high-tech, futuristic treatment. The Egyptian Mummy Project, which started doing an inventory back in late 2003, has recorded almost 600 mummies so far. King Tut was simply one of the very first mummies to be scanned, moving regally ahead of his countrymen. exactly as he did in life. This whole incredible scanning effort was made possible by a portable CT machine that was generously donated by the National Geographic Society and its manufacturer, Siemens. And the sheer amount of data they collected, it's staggering. This multi-million-dollar scanner mapped the mummy from head to toe, creating an astounding 1,700 digital X-ray images in cross-section. The precision we're talking about here is just mind-blowing. Tut's head alone was scanned in 0.62 millimeter slices just to properly register all its intricate structures. At this level of magnification, the resulting image takes on this really eerie detail, but it provided the precise, flawless data they needed for an accurate forensic reconstruction of this boyish pharaoh. Moving on to our next section, the death rattle of a dynasty. So before we look at the results of that modern scan, we really need to understand the tremendous weight of King Tut's demise. His funeral wasn't just the end of a single life. It was quite literally the death rattle of a dynasty. Tut's family line, the 18th dynasty, was incredibly powerful. His father, or maybe it was his grandfather, history is a bit fuzzy, Amenhotep III, ruled for almost 4 decades at the absolute peak of the dynasty's golden age. But when his son, Amenhotep IV, succeeded him, well, he initiated one of the strangest, most turbulent periods in the entire history of ancient Egypt. This new pharaoh completely upended their society. He promoted the worship of the Aten, which is the sun disk. He even changed his own name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of the Aten. He moved the religious capital away from the old established city of Thebes to the brand new city of Akhenaten, which we know today as Amarna. And he totally shocked the country by aggressively attacking Amun, a major god, literally smashing his images and closing down his temples. Ray Johnson, the director of the University of Chicago's Research Center in Luxor, summed it up perfectly. He basically said, the family that had ruled for centuries was coming to an end. And then Akhenaten just went a little wacky. After Akhenaten's death, this highly mysterious ruler named Smenkhare appeared super briefly and then just exited with hardly a trace. And then, a very young Tutankhaten took the throne. Now, he soon changed his name to Tutankhamun, which means living image of Amun, and he oversaw a massive restoration of the old traditional ways. He reigned for about 9 years, desperately trying to heal all the fractures in his kingdom, and then he just died unexpectedly. So, knowing all this intense, dramatic history, you can probably imagine the tension in the air on the night of the scan in January 2005. The workmen carried Tut from the tomb in his box. Just like pallbearers, they climbed a ramp and a flight of stairs out into that swirling desert sand and then rose on a hydraulic lift right into the trailer that held that $1 million scanner. But then, 20 minutes later, 2 men emerged from the trailer and just sprinted for a nearby office. The CT scanner had suddenly quit. And why? Because the swirling desert sand had actually gotten into a cooler fan and completely broken it. A nervous guard standing nearby actually joked, "Curse of the Pharaoh." And for a split second, it really felt like the ancient magic might actually be fighting back. But modern ingenuity, or actually scratch that, it was really just a quick trip to the local store, saved the day. Those 2 men who sprinted to the office, they returned holding a pair of ordinary, substitute, white plastic fans. And amazingly, these basic plastic fans worked well enough to cool the machinery, and they were finally able to finish the entire scanning procedure. Disaster totally averted. After carefully checking and double-checking that absolutely no data had been lost, the technicians turned Tut back over to the workmen. Less than 3 hours after he was initially removed from his coffin, the pharaoh was carried right back to his tomb. He was resting in peace once again in the exact same spot where the funerary priests had laid him over 3 millennia ago. Meanwhile, back up in the trailer, a technician pulled up the most astonishing images of Tut on a computer screen. Right there, from a scattering of digital pixels, a gray head actually took shape. The technician could spin it around, tilt it in every single direction. The neck vertebrae appeared as clearly as if you were looking at them in a modern anatomy class. Other images revealed a hand, several distinct views of the ribcage, and a transection of the skull. The sheer amount of detail they captured was simply breathtaking. Finally, the pressure was off. Sitting back in his chair, Zahi Hawass smiled, visibly relieved that nothing had gone seriously wrong with Egypt's most precious ancient asset. He actually confessed to everyone, "I didn't sleep last night, not for a second. I was so worried. But now I think I will go and sleep."
Staring into the reconstructed boyish face of King Tut, brought to life through the absolute magic of computed tomography, we really are left to marvel at his entire journey. From a hurried, unexpected burial in antiquity, to Carter's brutal extraction methods, all the way to the high-tech preservation of today, our fascination with him clearly endures. We have mapped his physical form in eerie detail, but honestly, it leaves us with one final, very provocative question to ponder. Even with all our modern technology, what profound secrets regarding his sudden death still remain hidden forever beneath that iconic golden mask? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found it as absolutely fascinating as I did.